Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Now, we're returning to this interesting article in The Guardian, Mark Lynas, Lynas, about how China blocked the carbon dictatorship demanded by the Anglo-American financier oligarchs and Malthusian genocidalists. They all agree, all the green fascist groups are screaming that this is the greatest disaster they've ever seen. The entire climate change coalition is fragmenting. Now, here's how it worked. China worked together with various friends of China in Africa, led by Sudan, so much demonized by Miss Rice at the United Nations. Here we have this guy, Lumumba D. Aping from Sudan, who said that what the rich countries are proposing is a suicide pact. It's an incineration pact that gets us back to the Holocaust during World War II. But here's the way it works, according to this guy, Lynas, that the Chinese plan was to block any accord and then rely on the pro-Third World sympathies of the green fascists. So the green fascists would then turn around and blame not China, but, of course, the U.S., Europe, Japan, and the rich people. In other words, they would respond on profile in a Pavlovian way. So according to Lynas, the Chinese line was essentially, we don't want any binding carbon targets, we don't want any temperature targets, and we don't want anybody else to embrace such targets. And it seems to be some support from India for the Chinese, but the Chinese get the lion's share of the honor. There had been a proposal to decree that 2020 would be the peak year of world carbon emissions. Chinese, boucher, no. So there was also a plan that they would attempt to get 50% cut of carbon emissions reached by 2050. China, boucher, no. There was an attempt to have a 1.5 degree target for the temperature increase. China, boucher, no. As Lynas says, China didn't want a deal, whereas Western demagogues with large Malthusian green fascist constituencies needed a deal. This included Lula of Brazil, Zuma of South Africa, Calderon, the infamous Fecal of Mexico, and Obama, of course. They all were desperate for a deal, so the Chinese simply had to block everything. And this is confirmed. Sarkozy blames China for the failure to achieve the results that had been desired. Carlgren, the environmental minister of Sweden, and this means he's the rotating top environmental boss of the European Union, says China blocked again and again. The British fought back using these puppet states like Tuvalu and the Maldives. Gordon Brown was there. But the Chinese opposed successfully all binding targets. And here's what they also did. They snubbed Obama. There were meetings that were set up where Obama was supposed to be there and the Chinese Prime Minister Wen was supposed to come. But Wen didn't go. He sent low-ranking subordinates to sit across the table from Barkey. So Barkey could turn on the charm, but it had no effect. And you have stories, right, that Obama at a certain point barged into a meeting, or he met Wen in the hall, and he said, Prime Minister Wen, are you prepared to meet with me now? And eventually there was a meeting. But the tactic, therefore, of China was to block it from the inside, and hats off to China for this. They've done a service to all of humanity. And at the same time to use Sudan and various other African friends to put out the line, of course, that the rich countries, the U.S., the European Union, and Japan, and the other richies, right, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, that they were responsible. So that's, I think, just a masterful piece. Now, on the healthcare front, this is more or less what I told you a long time ago, right? On this program, month after month, I've been saying the goal of this is a bailout of insurance companies. AIG was an insurance company, bankrupt, bailed out directly by the Fed and by the U.S. Treasury under the TARP. These other companies, Aetna, WellPoint, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Their insurance companies, they're bankrupt for the same reason. Derivatives speculation, financial derivatives, the root cause of the present world economic depression. Therefore, what's being done in this case is a bailout, not through the TARP, not through the Fed, but through you. You have to pay. You are forced to cough up money. You are forced to buy insurance from a private, deregulated, for-profit, rapacious company that has golden parachutes, that has lobbying budgets, advertising budgets, and so forth. And they're finding ways to get around any limits that might be imposed on those. So it's what I said, right? The House version has a public option, a wretched thing in itself. The Senate version doesn't have that. Nobody but nobody is talking about the obvious thing, which is to extend Medicare to people between 55 and 64. And why not extend it to everybody? Maybe $100 a month, right? $100 per person per month. That's what I have in my economic program we'll talk about in the next segment. So Obama, of course, is accused. Senator Feingold says Obama is personally responsible for the fact that there's no public option and there's no extension of Medicare. Senator Lieberman's office says that he was never even asked by Obama to support a public option, despite the fact that Lieberman had been campaigning for years to get Medicare extended to other parts of the population. It's a very moderate and long-standing demand. When Bill Bradley ran for president, it was essentially Medicare for all back in the year 2000. It's a tried and true Democratic Party position until the Wall Street puppet Obama comes along. Interestingly, in the meeting that Obama had with the House Democratic Caucus, he threatened Congressman DeFazio, basically saying, "Hey, DeFazio, we know where you live." This is just a scandalous example of the gangsterism and thuggery of the Obama White House with Rambo, Bozo, Emmanuel, the dead fish, pounding knives into the table. This character, DeFazio, actually one of the best, or perhaps the best Democrat in the House. This is the guy. He's one of two Democrats who voted against the bailout, against the TARP, when McCain was voting for the bailout and Sister Sarah Palin was supporting the bailout. DeFazio was against it. DeFazio is the chairman of the House Highway and Transit Subcommittee. He wants to build maglev rail, and he wants to pay for it with a Tobin tax on various kinds of derivatives. That's about as good as it gets. So isn't it interesting that Obama clashes with precisely the one of the most interesting, or perhaps the most interesting Democrat in Congress, and it shows the underlying tension. So we're going to have this vote. The cloture vote was the deed done in the dead of night, 1 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning before Christmas, and now we're going to have the 8 a.m. vote on Christmas Eve to ram this through. But take heart. The bills will now be subjected to a conference committee, haggling there, and then they've got to be repassed by both houses. And the conventional wisdom is that what passes the House will have a hard time passing the Senate and vice versa. So, again, I recommend gridlock. Gridlock is the key term. Remember, $500 billion of Medicare cuts, the looting of Medicare by Obama, a frontal attack by Obama as a Wall Street puppet and apostle of genocidal austerity. He's attacking the heritage of the New Deal and the Great Society. LBJ is rolling over in his grave when he sees what Obama wants to do. So assert your economic rights and stop the Obama looting of Medicare, which is the centerpiece of this entire monstrosity, along with the inconstitutional aspects. Back in a minute.